Welcome to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Liger. The Claw is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives. I'm joined today by Poonam Nath. She is Executive Leader of Product Operations at Fiserv. Poonam, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so I'm from Atlanta, and so Atlanta is a fintech financial services world, so we understand what Fiserv is and who Fiserv might be, but some others may not. So tell us a little bit about the world that Fiserv lives in.
Yeah. So Fiserv, where it is today, it's a combination of First Data, merchant services, and the issuing side of Fiserv. There was around 4 or 5 years ago, there was obviously a merger, and that became Fiserv as a whole. But Fiserv merchant services, where I'm most engaged in, it is, when you say finance, fintech, financial technology, it provides the core payment processing for SMB and enterprise clients, but it also provides value-added services, which goes into the fact of like, hey, embedded finance, fraud and security, tokenization, multiple other kind of value-added services, so that it's a full payment solution that is being provided to our enterprise clients.
Okay, all right, and so for a practical example of somebody who's listening, it's the way the small business would get paid at the end of the day.
So yeah, I mean, truly core payments is a very simple process, right? Yeah. You have the issuer engaged in there for the card holder. You have the payment processor. You may have a point of sale or the payment gateway, which is for online as well as for mobile and contactless. You can have those for payment gateway services. Then you have obviously the acquiring merchant bank, and then you have the all these card networks, right? Visa, MasterCard. So the process flow of those is very simple, that you're taking a payment from a customer. You're going through the whole payment processing, which is contacting the card holder's bank, the payment processor, as well as then you're contacting the card network. Okay. And then in the end, if everything is approved, the payment is going to happen. And then you just go back to the merchant and say, yes, this is approved. And then in the end of the day, it's a batch settlement process, right? Okay. That you're paying net fees, you're paying back to the merchant and settling the account over there. However, as you are now getting into this whole competitions between these competitive fintech fintech providers and payment processors, how do you provide that in the most efficient manner, speed to money, speed to revenue, least amount of complications in the process flow, and with now being mobile, online, all these kind of payment processes, omni-channel processing, that is sort of like now distinguishing between who's getting the merchants for this processing versus who may not be getting. And there's no stickiness anymore, right? Like the merchants can move from one processor to another. And so that's where like most of the distinguishing comes in. And Fiserv is one of the leaders in that. Okay.
So, and that'll give us a lot to talk about what you do in that category to make sure you guys are standing out. How did you get into this? Did you, like, as a little kid, did you like, did you like credit cards?
No, I mean, I think I never even thought about payments or fintech. My MBA, so my bachelor's was in economics. MBA was in finance. I joined telecommunications side, right? When we were in Chicago, I joined that part of it. However, when I moved over here, my whole background had been in finance, and then I moved into pricing. With a company that did proposals, like contractual proposals. And I really enjoyed that. I liked finance, but the point was I was very good with numbers. I was analytical, but I always felt I missed what do these numbers do next, right? Okay. Why do I care? I'm presenting them. I'm doing the dashboard. I'm doing this. But I always felt it was incomplete. So when I went into pricing, I could start seeing, with sales and, how do you present this pricing proposals? So I got excited about that. But then when I joined into actually the payments with the First Data, and that's where I was still in finance, but I felt like, hey, now I'm seeing so much more. I'm seeing there is so much more that is being offered over here.
Right.
And I moved from there, from pricing, from finance to pricing. Then I moved into the whole go-to-market, product commercialization side of things. And then from there, I moved into operations, again in this whole fintech industry. And now it's product operations.
Okay. All right. So you just kept finding new and interesting places to work off the numbers and make them actually mean sense.
Yeah, I think that's where I felt is that when you looked at the numbers, I always felt that I couldn't see a connection of given the numbers now, who's really going and moving the needle. And one thing I did identify, and I'll be honest about it, is that finding people who can understand numbers and understand how do these numbers can turn into something that can be positive, whether it's efficiencies, cost, or revenue, and then who can take it from end to end.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I realized earlier on in my career is I can sense very fast what the situation is and what is needed to be done, and then find the key players to make it happen with you.
Yeah.
And so I think that has helped me in my career progression.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because I went to school for computer science and realized I'd be programming computers every day of my life. And that seemed really boring and terrible. And so I ended up understanding the business side. So I can translate tech to business. So those of us that can figure out how to make it from one to the side, it's not an area of specific focus as much as it's a bridge. Like you can be a bridge builder between the two. So
understanding the tech side, understanding the business side, understanding what puts it together.
Yeah. Okay. So in your current life, like what is product operations? Like what do you do on a daily basis?
So product operations, actually, if you say, hey, what is product operations? Truly, the whole idea of product operations is that it's a role that is connecting and identifying what are the products that are being launched, and when the products are launched, what are the gaps, what are the impacts to the clients, and going back with that feedback to our product tech team saying, hey, these are the enhancements, this is the need over there. And from that process, those enhancements, improvements happen. So it is the bridge between what the client is getting, that we said they will get, what actually is happening, and then what is it that we can go back and give feedback on.
Okay.
It doesn't end only on that with the product and technology. It also comes into client experience, right? How are we servicing these? How are we onboarding? How are we servicing our clients? And then what is the learnings from that? And some things could be technology improvements, but some of them happen to be, just transformation from our end.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious about how you learn about that. So how do you know what the customer is looking for and needs to know? And, because that's an important part, being able to ascertain that, get those things in. So is there a process you guys follow to do that?
Yeah, I can tell you from what I am doing and how I am learning these things, not just with Fiserv, but overall.
Yeah.
Right. There is obviously, you get feedback from the customers, whether it is the NPS score, whether it is the long-term retention score, CSAT for the customer satisfaction score. These kind of things will bring a lot of input and feedback, and it doesn't end with just services. They will tell you, hey, these kind of numbers feedback will tell you, hey, this product wasn't working the way we thought it would work.
Right.
And it's at a product level too that you can get that input. So that's one way of getting it. The other way is from when the customer gets into production and they're facing issues, they're facing things that are not working the way they should be working, right? From a technology saying, hey, this is not, this process, this card is not working the way it is for this client. There's a transactional issue happening. And we get into that and understand, okay, this may be a kind of a bug which we need to improve on. And so you get that. So it is really real time in a way to get those feedbacks. Also from like, hey, my billing is incorrect. Why is it incorrect? Well, we go back and look, hey, the data feed, where was the data? Where was the reporting breakdown? Right. So those are all things that are real time that you're really getting into and understanding. And that feedback is going back to whether it is our team in servicing, whether it is in technology, but those improvements happen. And it's overall, it's not just saying, hey, Fiserv. That's how fintech improvements happen. And
it sounds like you're solving problems all the time. Like you're like finding little things that need to be worked out, and that seems
this
like
is what happens when you get out of finance. I think everybody who gets out of finance is good. You're telling this is what's happening, but who goes and really goes and does the work, right? If it is a pricing issue, if it's like, hey, billing issue, it is the folks who are really at that front end doing that. Yes, you're solving issues, problem, but it's all with the idea of better client experience.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? Retention. What does that mean? Revenue.
Okay, so retention and revenue, those are two key
Yep.
parts of what you're looking at when it
Yep.
relates to that.
Yeah.
And so I've heard your personal mantra is speed to revenue
Yeah.
and customer success.
Yes.
Speed to revenue and customer success. So unpack that for me. What do you mean by that?
So speed to revenue and customer success, the way I brought that was when I was into go-to-market and product commercialization. And the whole idea behind that is how, you have a product that is being launched, right? And then the idea is like, how do you make it happen where there's integration that has to happen from the client, right?
Okay.
It's not just with this payments, it's not like, hey, that's it, you're going to just get a customer and come in. Enterprise clients have custom kind of integrations that have to happen. And from that perspective, it's like you need to be working with them very closely and being able to get them to understand what is it from a technical perspective, from a certification that needs to happen and be completed by their end, so that they can finish their work. And then we are doing our end of integration requirements, right? Onboarding, technical integrations. So speed to revenue comes from the idea of, hey, we have the product, we have a client. From both sides, how do we make sure that we get everything worked out fast enough, and that smoothness is what's going to help us get to the revenue faster. So the sales can go sell anything they want, but if we cannot get the client onboarded on a timely basis, revenue is sitting, right? We are not going to get that revenue. Our forecasts are not working. And customer success goes back to the whole idea about when we are looking at these customers, what is it that's going to make their life easy during onboarding, life easy and effective and seamless while they are in production with us.
So Fiserv is a big organization. Mm-hmm. So that sounds like it would be a really complex thing to work through.
It is. It's very complex.
I am going to say this, and I mean this in the nicest way, but I don't always, big company and speed, right? Speed, like it takes a while to get stuff done, doesn't it?
So when I was with First Data in the go-to-market side of things, and I was working on the ISV channel too, that was where we were looking at, thinking about incentives that would go to these ISVs. Like if we told them, hey, if you got onboarded fast enough, you did your integration fast enough, hey, we'll give you this incentive.
Got it.
So those are ways that there are things that you do. In my current role, it's not more in that, but more from a client experience of making sure that when they're in production with us, that their life is smooth, we are resolving their issues fast enough, so they get the kind of positive client experience. Fiserv is huge, but I'll tell you from a C-level leadership perspective, they're all looking at the same thing. They want that client experience to be positive.
Yeah, and you made an important point too, like speed could be just on the customer side or client side, right?
Yeah,
getting them to jump through the hurdles, do the things they need to do to get themselves to that point. And that onboarding, because brief period of time was the COO for an ISO. Mm-hmm. So I know and they sold ISVs and VARs and things like that. And that whole getting them onboarded and getting it integrated into their systems and things, that can take a minute. Yeah, getting them there.
But it's not just only Fiserv. I'm telling you from a whole fintech side of things, from my experience, right? I've seen these things, the same kind of things. I've worked with different fintech companies too, whether it's Elavon, whether it's Goldman, Green Sky. So it's similar. It's a similar thing that everybody's looking at. How do we speed things for our clients and then the service? Okay.
And so in the world of integrating kind of business strategy with product, so those are the two, what do you think is the most important ingredient?
So again, it depends on when you say business strategy with integration, right?
Right.
The ingredient is again from the product has to do what you want it to do. Yeah. That's the most important thing, right? A lot of times we may be, and again, that's how fintech is. You're in a competitive world. You are going to be who's the leader, who's going to bring a product to the market, who's going to bring that value-added embedded finance to the market faster, right? Sometimes what happens is you bring it, but then maybe not all the kinks have been resolved, and then you're going with your first few customers and getting those kinks resolved. Business strategy and integration, the whole thing is you cannot slow down business strategy. Yeah. That's the most important thing, because that is going to direct where and how you're going to do things going forward, and bring in the right players so that revenue starts coming in, that in itself will feed itself into improvements that have to happen. Yeah. So I think with integration, it's separate, where we have a different team that has to know that what's going to be coming in and how. So you have to have that pipeline, and business strategy is what's going to help the sales to bring that pipeline. So they're two separate things, but both are very important to go in sync, and people have to realize that for new revenues, for retention, integration is a very important aspect of that to keep making the business strategy move forward too.
Very nice. All right, we're going to go to a commercial break.
Sure.
When we get back, we'll speak some more. So I am Eric Holtzclaw. I'm Chief Strategist at Liger. We're talking today with Poonam Nath. She is the executive leader of product operations at Fiserv. And we will be going to a commercial break. We'll be back in just a minute.
The Claw podcast is brought to you by Liger. Liger is a hybrid marketing firm combining a brand strategy consultancy and a production house that offers the full range of content and creative services. We can be your entire marketing department or your entire marketing department's favorite people to work with. We save the world from boring, broken marketing by putting businesses in brand therapy so they can express their most authentic, memorable selves. And then we share their story so they can be known. For more information, visit ligerpartners.com and follow us on our social media platforms.
And we're back. You're listening to The Claw. I'm talking today with Poonam Nath. She is the executive lead of product operations at Fiserv. So thank you so much for joining me today. We've been talking a lot in this fintech and financial services world. You've served in a lot of roles in that. So it's interesting because that's such a big part of, we're here in Atlanta, the Atlanta market, and kind of seeing different things in different categories. As you talk about and think about like pricing strategies, like what are some of the evolution around pricing strategies in these value-added services?
What I've been, again, from a fintech perspective, what I've been reading, seeing, and seeing where the trends are going, and what excites me is around bundled pricing.
Bundled, okay.
Because when you're doing transactional pricing, right, that's again, it's a very cumbersome way of taking account of it, and then you have a separate price for a separate kind of product that you're giving. But when you bundle these into one price, but and the volume based on maybe transaction volume, based on sales volume, but all your embedded value-added services can be bundled into one price. Billing becomes very easy.
Okay.
Billing becomes also predictable.
Yeah.
So what happens is whenever you do custom pricing for enterprise clients, right, there is always going to be manual billing aspect to it, and it is so difficult to reconcile at times, so difficult to audit, and it's because of the nature that was how core payment processing was. That was how transaction pricing was and billing. But now as we are evolving and there's so much more that is coming in, and you have to be more competitive, again, speed to revenue based on that. How do you sell something, make it simple, simplify it? It becomes where you can bundle a lot of things together, loyalty, gift cards, a number of things to bring it together and have packages based on your sales volume, transaction volume. And that's where I get excited too. Because
so bundling it, but then giving discounts based on volume.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Based on that. And it just becomes a lot. And the reason I say that, because again, I've seen the other side. I've seen operations. I've seen how difficult it becomes with, making sure that we're getting what we are saying we're getting. Contracts become very difficult to read.
Yeah.
Contracts have got, like this transaction, but then there's a price here, then there's, and then every year you may have a different pricing amendment to it, a new product being added to it. But how do you then keep up with it? How do you know you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and billing for what you're supposed to be billing?
It also feels like it makes it easier because on the customer or whatever side, they don't have to add something, like it's available to them as they want to use it.
Yeah, exactly. And so it is one of the competitive strategies where, like a lot of companies, fintech companies have started to look at, is that how do you differentiate, right? And what makes it easier? Yeah.
And so talk to me about collaboration along, so there's sales, there's solution, there's product, there's all kinds of groups. How is that impacted? What's the impact to the customer of, what that collaboration looks like? How does that have to fit?
We first try to hide anything that's not collaborative from the customer, right? So, but the whole thing is, what is it in for me kind of thing, right? Each of these teams have their they have their goals, their revenue goals, they have their own deliverables. How do you if you are trying to launch a product or a client, make them onboarded, each one has different obstacles they have to, hurdles and obstacles, priorities that have to be shifted around. And collaboration is very key, because sales is always going to get what they want, because they are the revenues and they have every right for that. I mean, honestly, I have a lot of respect for that. One of the hardest jobs to do is sales.
Yeah.
But the point is that how do we support them? How do we team up together? All these different teams team up together to say, hey, now that this is there, how do we make this happen?
Yeah.
And again, it is, you never want always an executive C-suite coming and saying, doing this to this. You have to work together. You have to learn how to get to the end point together. And personalities matter.
Yeah.
And you have to not lose your cool. Believe me, it is like really working together, understanding. And it comes a lot on who's driving it. So when I was in go-to-market, right, or even with product operations right now too, where I am, it's a lot falls on that one person to see whose personality is how do I approach this, how do I make sure we get to the same endpoint.
Yeah.
And it is a lot more homework on that one person, but I think that what helps distinguish, like, how do we get things completed and achieved, right?
Yeah.
Really knowing and understanding, and sometimes being the solution person.
Yeah.
Saying, hey, let's do this instead. Why don't we do this in the short term? Let's do the long term thing, but let's get that going. How do we close on this to get to the end goal? So the customer, the client does not have a negative experience, and they get what they want to get.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting dance, because you want to keep the customer or client in mind. They're the one you're building it for. They're the one paying the bill. Yeah. But at the same time, how do you speak the language of the internal person around how that's going to best to be represented to them and make them feel like they're getting their goals and objectives met, and those kind of
so you're right. Like, so the technology team, they will come back and tell you all these technical things, and this thing is there, then this bad, and then all this thing, and I'm like, okay, how do I interpret this into a business thing? And then I have to go back and communicate sometimes to the client on that, and then have to dumb it down to where, okay, this is how I'm seeing it and reading it, and is that the same thing you're saying?
Right.
Yeah, that is okay, fine. You know? So really changing the verbiage to make sure we are all aligned across.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you talked about sales being number one. So for Fiserv, that must be true. Sales is like Fiserv is a very sales-led organization.
Well, they bring in the revenue. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, there's some companies
that
are like product, or they all have an interesting slant. Like, who's like the lead.
I won't talk on behalf of Fiserv but where I see it and how I see it is, I see that, hey, sales and product are the most key players that will help us go forward.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool. Yeah. So you've been through a couple of iterations of what you've done and moved and whatever. And we know fintech and financial services, like, just kind of throwing them together in a category. There's a lot of changes, a lot of things kind of coming on the horizon. What's interesting to you? What are you excited about?
So what excites me is truly the global market, right? Moving into, with all of our payment gateway, mobile and online and tapped, all these kind of different payment instruments, and moving this into the global market and being in that competitive landscape. USA is there. Yes, that's great. We are working on that. It's there. But now how do you build this infrastructure? Same infrastructure of a go-to-market, same infrastructure of helping resolve issues for the clients once they're in production, integration. How do we build an infrastructure that is going to be in the global market scheme? From a product, from a perspective of what is being offered, it's going to still stay the same, right? Like, embedded finance is a big thing at this point.
Tell everybody, what is embedded finance?
Like, for us, it's like for a merchant or any merchant that is there, like, how do they take in some of the banking kind of solutions and put it into their payment solution in one place. So one-stop shop for everything. So whether it is disbursements, right, like say for Uber and all that, how do those payments happen? It is embedded into the payment solution.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but these are all things that are there. That is going to be efficiencies around it, speed around it. But how do you go into this global market and be able to be one of the first leaders over there, or be part of that whole competitive landscape. So for me, that is what's exciting at this point.
And it's true that in this category, often the U.S. is behind, right? Like we're not even close to the first to adopt a new technology in this
That's
space.
true. I saw that when I visited India a couple of years ago, and I'm like, everybody is doing P2P or, to the business, P2B. And it's like, I'm like, we don't do that much here, and it's like me going there and talking and saying something about, hey, how do I pay this for the check, or do I pay by credit? Like, why are you doing this? Just do this. And then I'm like, oh my God, really? So it's yes, you're right. Even in also Africa, right? But those were the requirements. Those were the needs. It's not that USA was behind it. It's more from a perspective of economic needs, right?
Okay.
And that's why they became the early adopters, right? So and so it also depends on that. It's not that we are behind on technology or behind on this. We've got a lot more rules and regulations to follow, and which is important too. We have to be compliant. So there is not I don't see that as a negative, but I do see that hey, there is still a major opportunity for a lot of these companies to go into those markets.
Yeah. And, so regulation and modality. So like it's the availability of something to me to actually use it.
Yeah.
So if I've got just a cell phone, then that's the way that it's going to work.
100%. I was brought up in Zambia in Africa.
Yeah.
I find out about over there, like how are they using their mobile payments? How are they, able to do again P2P, like so Venmo and all these things. Those are different ones that they already have over there. But it is the time of that need. It is that those things and technology development happen there faster on those because the regulatory requirements were not as high as over here, so those are the economic needs make a big change of what is going to happen faster.
How do you get into on your side, like how you determine which of those need to be introduced next? Like how does Fiserv determine like there's something happening in another market and bring it over? Is there some indications in those?
Pfizer has got a, they have
I guess they're seeing
investment,
it in other countries,
and I'm very proud to be part of the Fiserv community because I know that they have got major lead indicators. They understand the market, they understand the competition, and they are able to identify the next trends and things. And that's not because it's one person; it's a whole community over there doing it.
Nice. And so if someone, what would be your advice like to a younger version of you that wants to like get into the fintech financial services? Like what's a good entry point or a good way to learn more about this space?
It's if it's deliberate. Obviously, a lot of these young folks these days, majority of stuff is fintech, right? Like, technology driven, just understanding what's the market, what's there, like, I think it's just the interests that you have, right? You could do finance anywhere. You could do go-to-market anywhere. But if it's fintech, it's because you are interested in technology. You are interested in how is this payments landscape. It is a lot closer to how you do your day-to-day lives too.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's just they have this fintech organization over here. They have jobs that are always listed out there. They have also a lot of internships. A lot of these fintech companies have that. So getting into just those internships and then seeing where that goes.
Yeah, what's interesting because I fell into this space back in the day. So I worked for CyberSource back in that was my first, and then everybody seemed to have gotten to it in a very weird path, right? Yeah. It's like not something that people necessarily talk about as like a degree or an industry to focus on or whatever. And then you find it and then people stay in it and you can build a really great career, do all kinds of different interesting things.
You can do different, that's, I'm a prime example of that.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Yeah. It's been great. So you've been listening to Poonam Nath. She is the executive leader of product operations for Fiserv, which I think I'll get by the time we get done. And finding and connecting with you, LinkedIn is a good place. Yeah, so you can connect with her on LinkedIn. She does a bunch of panels and has conversations with people in this category. And I appreciate you listening to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw with Liger. The Claw is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives. And until next time.